Today is being observed globally as World Environment Day. The day is an annual event led by the United Nations Environment Programme, UNEP. It is celebrated on June 5th for encouraging awareness and action for the protection of the environment. This year marks 50th year anniversary of the event. The theme for the World Environment Day is focusing on solutions to plastic pollutions under the campaign Beat Plastic Pollutions. The world is being inundated by plastic. More than 400 million tons of plastic is produced every year, half of which is designed to be used only once, and of that less than 10% is recycled. An estimated 19 to 23 million tons ends up in lakes, rivers, seas, and all that. Today, plastic clogs our landfills, leaches into the ocean, and is combusted into toxic smoke, making it one of the gravest threats to the planet. And in realization of the effects of this menace, today we'll be discussing the effects to beat plastic solution. And with me in the studio, or with us in the studio if you like, is a safe environment. It's a campaigner for safe environment, Yazid Yakubu. It's a pleasure to have you join us this morning. Mr. Yazid is the president of Cleaners Network, an organization that promotes healthy methods of waste disposal and recycling. It's a pleasure once again to have you join us in the studio. Once in a while you get the opportunity to take a pause from politics, maybe from sports. And now most of the major leagues are winding down and put our gaze on some of the things that are very critical to our well-being in the environment. Today is the World Environment Day, Pollution Day, and we are looking at the effects of plastic pollution. Can you, as a way of starting off, can you please take us through why this day is important, and why do we even need to celebrate a day like this in Nigeria?
Okay, thank you so much for having me. Okay, so the World Environmental Day is something that's very important because first of all, without the environment, we cannot thrive or survive. We need the environment to live and carry out our day-to-day activities. And for ancient of days, we have degraded it constantly from generation to generation. So I feel like at this point in time, there's a heavy clarion call globally for all of us to do better, for us to, protect the environment for the next generation that are going to take over from where we've stopped. So I feel like it's a very, very important battle because it affects everything that concerns us as individuals, organizations, and even businesses.
All right, so can you tell us more about why Nigeria needs to celebrate this day?
Okay, Nigeria needs to celebrate this day more from the point of view of us putting in more work towards curtailing the excesses of our pollution. So the celebration needs to be put in place to sensitize people, raise awareness about the major state of plastic pollution that takes place every day in the country, and for us to sort of try to do better, coming up with initiatives. People will come together today in Nigeria across various demographics now, talk about ways forward in how to curtail our excesses, and maybe from this we can find a way forward.
All right, if we were talking to Nigerians in the rural area or maybe suburban areas, this will look like some luxury.
Yes.
And I'm saying this because we live in a society that doesn't even provide for a proper waste disposal system.
Yes.
You go into estates everywhere in Abuja, for instance, and they provide for everything. There is a space for transformer, but there is no space for waste disposal.
You have to even buy your dustbin.
That's right. So basically what people do is load the waste in a nylon pack, and just when they get to a place where nobody is watching, you just dump them by the way. So what are those practices that sort of pre-exposes us more in this country to wrong waste disposal?
Okay, to add to what you've said, sir, there was a time we carried out a campaign where we used to go to markets to clean on their behalf, to help them clean up and also sensitize them, showing them that, okay, this is how you should clear out your plastics and your especially pure water sachets, And when we got there, they were like, I beg, they were not really welcoming to us. They were like, this is how they live every day. In fact, they even felt like, okay, maybe we're from government and we're giving some money to come and do something, when we're trying to talk to them about
to justify the money.
Yes, so you're very right about this. They even thought we're from they just felt like these guys are just here to take advantage of them and whatnot. So there is that major problem. And what causes it mainly is we have failed to find alternative solutions to the things that we're using. For instance, the plastics that we use every day, most people every day when they're coming out from their house, they are with a bottle of water, 50 cl. Some people are even with the 1 liter big one. Why can't this be changed to a bottle of water? Bottled. Why can't this be changed to a water bottle? Something that you can reuse. I feel like the 3 R's, which is mainly spoken about globally, which is to reduce the use of things that cause this environmental decline, to recycle, like you said about the estates, there should be a bin for the perishables. There should be a bin for the things that can be recycled. So that way, even from the collection point, from the waste maintenance people, when they come, they already know how it's already separated from the homes. If this can be embedded in us now, like recycling from the get-go is going to be demystified, and then just finding better ways, better solutions to this epidemic, basically.
Okay. All right. The other day I was watching a video on, I'm not sure if it's CNN or Al Jazeera now, and it focuses on waste management in New York. Matter of fact, it's one of the biggest waste producers in the world, and it's a mega industry. People go to work from 6 p.m. and they are rushing to beat 7 a.m. to clear the city for the next day of pollution. Do we understand waste as a wealth in this country? Because why I'm bringing up this question is, in a number of countries where I visit, collection of waste, there are incentives tied to collection of plastics. If you go to the supermarket, if you bring back the plastic from your last purchase, you get a rebate on the next purchase. Something like that. The only people who give incentives for waste collection are the Mekwala base that we see in our aluminium condemn and the rest of that. Is there something we are not doing, whether in terms of industrial approach or a government approach? What exactly do we need to do to incentivize waste collections the right way in this country?
In a nutshell, it's just looking at it like waste is trash. But there are so many NGOs that are already even making efforts towards this. They are sensitizing. There are even some communities for the popular Babambola, what we call Babambola in Nigeria. There's a community for them that has even been incepted by some NGOs. But I just feel like it's still more along the lines of that sensitization that we've been talking about. If people can understand that this plastic I'm throwing inside the bin, this sachet I'm keeping here, I can convert it to something. Like now, for instance, when bottles are recycled, it can be converted into shirts. It can be converted into sneakers. And then most big companies in Nigeria that produce our water, our minerals, if you can find a way to position yourself and take back to them, they can reuse those bottles now and they pay you for it. So even when you look at the SDG goals, SDG goal 8, decent work and economic growth, when you protect the environment, it even facilitates economic growth. But it's just that people are not really aware of it and they don't know the how to. So this is where our government now needs to come in and act vehemently. I know that yes, they've been taking some steps, but they can't relent. They have to still go out to the major local communities, because I feel like those are the people that really start the degradation more. They throw it into the water, the waters around their environment. If you're even driving in Abuja, if you just pass Jabi Lake, you would see how some parts of it even have a lot of plastics. So it starts from the grassroots, if you can take it up. And also even with the younger minds, children. If the children from the very get-go, from primary school now, from secondary school now, they can be sensitized about this and they can even be taught in their curriculum that, okay, if you can recycle now, from now, you've already gathered a skill that you can use when you grow older. It will really help.
Right. So while Sunday was actually introducing, the discussion, there was a particular line that scared me, where he said, plastic clogs our landfills, leaches into the ocean, and is combusted into toxic smoke, making it one of the gravest threats, and all that. Now, I also read somewhere that greenhouse gas emissions linked to plastics are forecast to grow in percentage, that's of global emissions by 2040. I don't remember the percentage, but it's really, really high. How bad can things get if nothing is actually done about it by 2040? Okay,
so the life on water, we as human beings now, we benefit from them, like the fishes.
Okay.
So it means in the course of them ingesting all those toxic waste that in the water, when we buy those fishes and we end up ingesting them, what happens to us? We find ourselves in a very unhealthy situation and we end up seeing ourselves in the hospital. So in taking care of the life underwater, we are taking care of ourselves. So it's going to get really, really bad if we don't deploy some certain mechanisms that will curtail the excesses in those waste in the water. So it's going to get really, really bad and be detrimental to all our health. And again, it will not even allow us to find, like, just like that, for instance, the water promotes tourism to an extent. Some people travel all the way from UK, Canada to Lagos to stay on the beach side. Imagine staying in front of the beach side and all you're seeing is plastic and dead there. So it affects even our economy.
But is recycling actually a solution? Because you know, a lot of people are saying that it's not. It might not be a solution. That's recycling. It might not be like the only solution. Like, how about producing biodegradable plastics and all that?
When you look at the cost of execution of those type of things now, it's mainly the government that can really listen, and then us as individuals. Are we ready for those type of things? That's one question I asked myself this morning when I was thinking about World Environmental Day. A lot of people are quick to say, oh, we should do this, we should do that, we should do this. But some of those people, when you go to their houses, they are still practicing some of those things that they even sort of talk about that are not working. Like now, for instance, let's say the plastic bottles we collect now, when it's turned into like glass, for instance, let's not even say something that's biodegradable, like a glass bottle. If you turn it into a glass bottle now, when people finish using it, will they know to keep it in a place that it can be reused for something else? Will they know to separate it properly?
So what they do in Nigeria most times is they just throw it to the trash, and then what did you call them? Like, we'll be able to find them, pick it up from the trash.
So the question is, are we ready for this change?
Talking about being ready for change, in the campaigns that you do, does it look like we have a state in Nigeria that we can look up to as a model for this sort of change? I mean, if you go to other places, there are communities that are championed for this kind of initiative. Do we have any such communities in Nigeria?
So Sunday, I would say, you know, to a large extent, to be fair, a lot of people are trying. Individuals are really, really trying with the use of social media. You know, if you go online these days, you see people doing campaigns in line with like environment and whatnot, but I just feel like more people need to be involved. We don't yet have like that major model yet that is helping the concept of this plastic problem. And I feel like at some point we need to even start holding, I don't want to call their names, but some organizations that are the major producers of this Coke and Fanta that we drink every day. We need to start holding them, because if you think about it, they are, to an extent, they are the major contributors to this. Without them giving us, the individuals,
almost everything is bottled right now.
Without them giving us. So I think at some point they should be held accountable, and they should also be premised with the duty of coming up with models that allow their customers and individuals to be able to manage the waste properly.
So how do we begin to hold them? What are global best practices for how these things are done? Because I know that in some climes, what the government do is, if you produce certain things that are harmful to the environment, they pay more taxes.
Yes.
If you show that you are moving towards an environment-friendly packages,
you will get more customers, and you get
some kind of incentives. Is that the approach you're talking about?
Yes, and also to make it a law. Because I feel I was reading about the plastic bill. I don't know if you saw it sometime. They've been pushing it for like 2-3 years now about or stopping the use of plastic completely in Nigeria, but then it's still dwindling. You know, it's not been passed into a law yet. So I feel like more steps need to be put in place for that. Once it's passed as a law now, the producers of this know that they have to be careful. In those countries now that we're talking about, let's say Sweden, for instance, you see that they have regulatory bodies and laws that are very, very defined, and protocols that these organizations that produce these things have to follow. And then those incentives now come in line when you follow them. You know, you have like something that they give you something back for following this, because they know that, okay, you have to put in structures in place. We don't have that here.
Okay, I read somewhere about the Global Plastics Treaty. Yes, it's the United Nations Environment Assembly, where they agreed in March 2022 to draft a multilateral environmental treaty addressing the global plastics crisis. And, you know, the mandate actually paves way for countries to establish a legally binding instrument to address the impacts of plastics through their life cycle. Can you highlight more or tell us more about this treaty?
Yes, aside even that, there's even a major, it also comes with funding. It helps, there's a funding that's in line with that treaty that enables governments and individuals to be able to do more, because when you talk about plastic problem, it is actually very, very financially overwhelming in handling it. And again, government alone cannot handle it. So I feel like the best part about that treaty, aside them making it a law, it's the funding that's going to come with it to enable more people to get involved, to set up what you call MRFs, which is small collection points and small recycling units where these things where plastics can now be managed and proposed for the right use. So the treaty plays a very, very important role in development, but I just pray that it actually comes to pass and it's added to our laws here.
All right, yes, let us begin to break down some of these things. This is also an opportunity to educate communities that are watching.
Okay.
So when you look at all that we need to do and where we are as a country, what are the simple practical approaches that you think households and communities can begin to deploy? Because it is one thing for you to even separate those waste and have them and put them where they are supposed to be easily collected. It takes forever for the environmental people to come around and even clear the waste. What else can people do at their own small communities to properly take care of?
Yes, I feel like estates now, for instance, should have an environmental community. The same way you have an association of house owners or house renters, there should be like a smaller division. There should be like an environmental group where maybe they all agree that, okay, we should have one particular place where we all drop our waste, or somebody is going to come and collect it. Then in that group also now, they can also decide to say, okay, our children can even be the major stakeholders in this, so that to get them involved and to get them excited. Literally 2 steps that will just eventually lead to bigger, because those children now, one day leave the home, go to school. Whatever they've been practicing at home now, when they're in school, they'll still practice it. When they become adults, teenagers, and they're staying on their own, they'll remember that from where I grew up, we're already separating waste, we're already doing things in a different way. So it's just, and then just also still showing the money part of it. I feel like that's an exciting part for everybody. When you know that in the course of me participating in recycling, I would make money. Then beyond even recycling, the reuse part. Let's say, for instance, when I was younger, I would open the deep freezer and I would see a big ice cream container, and I would think that it's ice cream that is inside it at home, and I would go and meet a goosey soup inside it. So we should also we should start embedding those values in the younger minds that, okay, there are some of these containers now, instead of throwing them away, some of these plastics, it can be reused for something else. So along the borders of recycling and reuse, if this is embedded just slowly from the small home circles, it becomes something very, very, big, but just small steps that are consistent.
Okay, so what about water sachets? Do they fall into the category of plastic pollution?
Yes, they do. I feel that one is even a major epidemic. It's a major epidemic. There are some areas you go to in Nigeria that you can't even walk properly without your feet picking them up. And that's why I said the major facilitators of this waste problem is people from the grassroots. So those sachets, again, they don't really know. Sometimes when you look at those bambolas, those guys actually make money. Those guys that pick all those sachets, even beyond them sachets, you have cartons, like the cartons that come with new things you buy. And sometimes when you even pack it in your house, like now, for instance, in my own estate, I don't allow the plastics to be thrown in the bin at home. So I put it in a shaka. I don't know if you know that reusable bag. It's very, very strong. Yes. So we put in a shaka. We put that in front. Yes, in front of the house. Then the cleaners around the estate now, they come now and take all the plastics that are inside. And sometimes they end up giving us bath, like a bathing this in exchange for it.
Talking about plastics, that's sachet. What about plastic bags too? It constitutes a lot.
Yes, that's why I said that we use a sack. instead of a plastic bag. Because in the course of you even still recycling, I see some people now, just for instance, just like the plastic leader, that dustbin leader, the black one that we use, it also constitutes to the waste. So even what we use, what we're using to try to curtail it, we have to also look into it. So there are various levels to it, and the government and various individuals have to get involved, and also, you know, businesses. It cuts across various levels. It's a communal thing.
Interesting. Interesting how much we need to do to get to where we need to go. But, you know, still coming back to the role you play as a campaigner. Well, this is the beginning of a new government. It will not be fair to begin to evaluate those here. But
yes,
for the ones you have worked with, majority of the ones you have encountered, do you get the sense that they understand the urgency of the need to save the environment? Do they just see it like one distraction or something that is being forced on us by the international community, and if we're not doing it, we'll be seen not to be, you know, do they get a sense?
There's only this table we are shaking.
Yeah.
Okay, some people take it as a trend. Some people look at it as, okay, let me just be part of it because it's now the thing that is the in thing. I don't know if you get me, because again, it positions you for you to be part of, for you to be looked at global. It positions you in a global seat. I feel like that's the major problem we have. Some people are not doing it because it's from the bottom of their heart. Like what I said, you see some people that talk about this plastic pollution things, but some of the practices they do in their lives still adds to it. So I feel like one of the problems we face, like you said now, is that some people just look at it as a trend. Or let me just look like I'm part of this movement. Let me come out, display, and look at it, and let people say, oh, you're really doing well in the environment. For me, I delved into the environmental world from cleaning service. So in the course of us rendering cleaning services for various or our clients across multiple states, I saw, you know, the level of the urgency for us to protect our environment. I saw that my position was more than just cleaning and earning from it, but I had to play a role in safeguarding the environment. So even for my organization now, when we go to your house and you have plastics there and we give you a discount in your next service. You know, so I'm just in my own little way. That's why I said individuals really need to get involved in it. It's from going into houses, going into spaces, I saw the urgency of it.
Reminds me of a particular lady that actually uses plastics and you know, sachet to make interlocks.
Interlocks?
Yes.
Yeah,
wow.
I think I came across that technology somewhere in an African. As a matter of fact, I did make inquiries about the machines, about how you could locally, you know, reprocess plastics, and they are strong as your bricks.
Very
and
strong.
when they fit in you, and she makes them in different colors. Matter of fact, so if you want.
Well, this lady is actually Nigerian.
Yeah,
she's a Nigerian.
Yeah.
Oh, all right. That means somebody has beaten me to that business idea.
Because I was going to ask you when you said you read your research about the machines. I was about to say that. Are you trying to?
Well, they've asked us to diversify.
Yes. But
if I'm not in the studio, I should be making money through something. But do we get those kind of initiatives?
Yes.
How many of those initiatives are there, and what are their major challenges? Is it funding?
Yes,
some partnership. What exactly?
There was a school I taught pro bono sometime about 4 years ago, and then there was a time we went on an excursion to an embassy, and the embassy was actually teaching the children how to convert this nylon bag into art, and they were able to convert it into like flower vases and whatnot. But the only problem is that most of those things now that they've created, who will buy it to encourage it? So that's where funding comes into place. Okay, so if somebody's spending their time now to convert plastics or sachets or cartons into something that is reusable, will anybody buy it? Just like the interlocks that you spoke about. How many Nigerians would use plastics as interlocks, even if the lady positions herself and markets it properly? Everybody will still prefer this thing because they'll be like, oh, what am I using plastics for? So it still boils down to that sensitization again. So we have people now that are converting these things, that are reusing these things. But I feel like we're in a place where we're not really aware of like how much we can benefit from plastics and waste.
Okay, so when it comes to, you know, plastic waste disposal, you know, how are we going to be able to meet our SDGs when it comes to, carbon emission, when it comes to, plastic waste disposal?
I feel like the main answer for that is collective effort. All of us coming together, understanding, first of all, that there's a problem, there's an urgency, and that's why a day like this is even important. There's a problem, there's an urgency for it, because I feel like we are always saying this, saying that, but collectively understanding that, okay, there is an issue here. We all need to play our parts individually to see that our country moves forward when it comes to these environmental problems.
Okay, I said carbon, green gas.
Yes,
green
yes.
gas is actually different from carbon.
So, I'd like to also peep into your mind. When you try to dissect this problem, what do you see? Is it because Nigeria is not even yet urbanized? What do you call it? Industrialized as well.
Yes.
So it means the more calls we make for industry, the more likelihood we are going to see more of this problem. Can we find solutions in the way we used to live? I grew up in a house where waters were preserved in a clip. Well, people will say that's local, but a lot of things were done with local resources. Even the cups, the fancy cups, were those made of clays, not the water bottles.
Yes.
And I grew up in a state where you open the tap and it runs, and nobody was preserving. Well, we have water bottles, but not what is fancy, the fancy types now, where you bring in disposable bottles into your houses, and when you use them, you dispose and you go for even your kids to school these days go with. Can we, as an intermediary, where can we find alternatives in what we used to do that we have sort of discarded now in a bid to be trendy?
Yes, to be trendy, and it's as if then we used to live better than now.
Absolutely.
Because in addition to this, people used to fetch water from wells directly, like just throwing their bucket in.
Yeah.
But now, if you even throw a bucket into a well, it's possible that what you bring out from the well will not be something that you can use. Well, in the course of us modernizing and trying to move with with trends and evolution, we sometimes forget our values. Even beyond the environment itself, if you even notice, we're losing culture, we're forgetting who we used to be and whatnot. And some of these things are very, very detrimental to us. I feel like it's still taking me back to the family unit. Because like you said, now at home, this was when you were younger, now at home, the clay pots and whatnot. So it starts from the effort that one puts in as a parent. Like now as a father, I'm supposed to already know that my daughter should already have some form of sensitization from her very young age. The family unit, the same way the government is important, the family unit is important. Because where do we all start from? Aside from maybe some people that were not opportune to start with a family, but even if you end up in an orphanage, it's still sort of like a mini family unit. So it still goes back to the values that we have as individuals that we can now pass on to the next generation.
When we talk about carbon emission, as Usaina mentioned, when I listened to some of our leaders, I was part of the UN General Assembly the last time.
Yes.
And I was listening to conversations on the sideline. And some of the arguments our leader made is that our carbon footprint is very small. In other words, we have not caused enough destruction in the world for you to start asking us to change the way we live. Allow us to properly industrialize. Let us cause proportionate distortions the way you have caused in Europe with your industrialization before you now start telling us to cut back on carbon emissions or carbon footprints and all. Is that the right argument to start having now?
No. But what I would like to say is, if we're complaining, when you profile a solution, have we also preferred an option, an alternative? That's the question. When I hear carbon, when people talk about carbon emissions, that's what comes to my mind. For instance, now the major things that produce the carbon emissions, what are the alternatives that we have in Nigeria that you can use for them?
Absolutely nothing.
All right.
Close to zero.
All right. We're actually about to wrap up, so let's have your last line or your final word.
Okay, I would just like to mainly say that as individuals, as organizations, as businesses, we should understand that we're all custodians of the sanctity of our environment. And all of us play an important role in, safeguarding the environment. It goes further to affect everything that affects our living. So we should all try to do better.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Yazid, for joining us today on World Environment Day. All right, so that was Yazid Yakubu, a campaigner of Safe Environment and also president of Cleaners Network, which is an organization that promotes healthy methods of waste disposal and recycling.